Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and everyone in between. This is a new full episode of Author Talks, not a short one for book promotion this time, although I will say that here, now, it's happened. Lost Station Chelsea was available since July 30th. Oh good lord, my memory. And it's available currently in ebook and hardcover. There's something squiffy going on with the book listings. I think launching it during a massive IT outage has had a rather negative impact. Also, personal updates for anyone who hasn't caught it on my other socials. Due to the latest, not the only by any means, the latest actions and words of Elon Musk, basically completely misinterpreting and misrepresenting what has been happening in the UK in terms of the far-right riots and the response to them, both from the public and the authorities, I have decided that Twitter that was, now X, is just one step too far for me. I know it may well be a temporary impediment to my ability to market myself, be out there, but I think that I think that the trade-off is, worth it. Because that platform has just gotten worse and worse, especially over the past 12 months. After initially feeling like it would, just trundle along like before, albeit maybe a little less overseen and controlled than it should have been. But now it's just, the things that are allowed to be on there, the people who are allowed to be on there, is beyond unpleasant. It's going into the realms of disgusting. So I've decided to move away from that. I'm still active on my BlueSky, Facebook, Threads and Instagram feeds. Instagram when it works, because there are some occasions where it can decide to arbitrarily log you out because it thinks you're a bot. I don't know why, it just does. I think it's probably on their end rather than on mine. But also my websites are still a thing. Website proper and a Google blog. I mean if you look me up in Google search, I appear now. I'm actually one of the top results, which is something. A couple of years ago I would absolutely not have been that. In fact, a year ago I absolutely would not have been that. But yeah, so if you're wondering why I'm suddenly not quite as present on some areas over others, it's because I've decided to take a moral stand. Because X/Twitter has stopped being a place that I will tolerate for marketing purposes and has started being a place where extremist groups, racists and sexists and heavens knows who else are finding a haven. It's frightening what it's becoming. So I don't want to be a part of it. And I've decided that from August 13th my account there will be deactivated. And I don't know whether posts there continue to exist and it just doesn't have anything. But, we'll have to see how that goes. And apologies for that. Bip, 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 bip. My mic decided to rock a bit. Now, not only is this episode of Author Talks going to include a short story later on, you can skip to it if you like, I won't stop you, but it's also going to be including some recommendations, because something that I realise I enjoy, even though not much, relatively compared to other things, is sci-fi horror. I mean, fantasy horror theoretically too, but that's a bit rarer without it just going into full-blown horror, because a lot of horror, in quotes, is rooted in folklore and the fantastical. I mean, let's face it, Halloween and Friday the 13th are very fantastical. They may be, about people, but come on, the things those people go through, there is no way there is not some supernatural element there. Sci-fi horror, on the other hand, is an otherness that is also enjoyable for me because, hey, it's woo, but it's also the otherness of the outside, of the weirdness. And there are plenty of examples of sci-fi horror. I mean, there's one that I remember from a few years ago that has debatable quality. It's called Pandorum, and it's basically a colony ship that crashed, and there's a whole whole mystery of identity plot point. And for the materials they have, the actors did a decent job. There's also, on the more generic side, something like Resident Evil, which is sci-fi horror, although the film series turn it more into sci-fi action. Apart from the first one, if you find the first original Resident Evil film, let's call this my first recommendation out of the ones that I'll be featuring. The Resident Evil film from 2002, written and directed by Paul W.S. Anderson and starring Milla Jovovich in the lead role as Alice. There is practically no character carryover or crossover from the video games on which this film is based. But, and it's a big and significant but, it is very much a good film of its kind. In fact, it's a good film that surpasses the stereotype of the video game adaptation and becomes something, I don't want to sound too generic, but of more value, perhaps? There's definitely an extra something there that means that I enjoy it. And also the ending, mwah, chef's kiss, perfect. It's just Alice in the streets of Raccoon City with a shotgun waiting for the zombies to come. It's just pure gold. It's wonderful. The sequel's not so much, but that first one is amazing and also has a very good horror-esque ending, which I think means it still qualifies as sci-fi horror, not just horror-themed sci-fi. The next recommendation that I think I would count as sci-fi horror is a bit of J-horror. Imagine. J-horror is something that really came to the fore in the 1990s to early 2000s with films like Ju-on, Curse, and what's the other one? Oh yes, Ringu. I always forget Ringu, or The Ring as it's commonly known in English. A lot of the movies like this have been remade, and quite a few of them are based more in Japanese folklore than they are in science fiction. Some people will talk about Parasite Eve being part of J-horror, and while the original novel might be, I don't think the film is. I have watched it. It is far more just straight sci-fi, more of a sci-fi thriller than a sci-fi horror. But what I would oddly count as a sci-fi horror is Kairo, also known as Pulse. Released in 2001, this film is fascinating. It deserves to be better known. It's not scary in the sense of, the kind of really deep, unsettling scares that the horror genre is stereotyped for. But it's definitely horror because it tackles some really uncomfortable themes of isolation and self-identity. To give you a very broad outline, it's set during the late 90s to early 2000s, the early internet age, which is a weird time anyway, but it's based around the concept of something breaking into the world of the living and the horrible impact it has on two particular groups of people. One, the employees of a garden centre who gradually become afflicted by a kind of curse almost and each fall apart. The other, a set of students at a university who really feel the social isolation that was beginning to be very apparent in Japanese society. That's what I love about this film. It tackles something in Japanese society that today has become a problem that is accepted, hasn't been dealt with, but needs dealing with. The concept of the self-isolation, the shut-in, the hikikomori, that kind of lack of connection, that feeling of distance. The whole film is themed around this, the concept of separation and loneliness in a growing tech age. Admittedly, Kairo has a supernatural slant to it because the beings that are appearing are generally interpreted as ghosts, but it's very much... it feels grounded more than other J-horrors of its kind in the modern age, in modern tech. It's very much an examination of the effect of modern technology on a society. And that's why I really love it. It's one of my favourite, not just favourite Japanese movies, but favourite movies in general. It's just so good. Find and watch the original if you can. Not the remake. It was remade in the late 2000s by Wes Craven, and that remake is dreadful. I have seen enough of it to know it is dreadful. Apparently Wes Craven also thought it was dreadful because it suffered from creative interference, and we would not have the original Kaido if not for a different licensing company, because the original licensee, who also made the remake, was trying to pull off some shenanigans that meant the original could not be accessed. It's a whole thing, and oh boy. Anyway, that's in the past, but the original is out there, it's available. In fact, it's more available than ever, and even though it's rather unfairly maligned, I think, because it's not classic J-horror, I think that makes it all the stronger, and if anything, a good entry point into J-horror, because it's a good sort of sci-fi slant on things. It deals with real social issues that have not gone away. In fact, they've gotten worse. This essence of communication, isolation, sense of self in the tech age. And also a wonderful take on the concept of the afterlife through this sort of, just great film, highly recommended. And to the tune of rain falling outside my window, which is what the background thing here is doing, the next is not so much a recommendation as an apologia, an explanation, a justification, because to explain this I'm going to need to tell an anecdote. One of my early visits to BristolCon, down in Bristol Convention, there was a gap in a schedule because the programming being printed was from the previous year, and so a group of us, including me, ended up sitting down and we had a talk, and we were going through favourite fantasy sci-fi films. Alien came up. I really like the original Alien. In fact, I love it. One of the best films I've ever seen. But when everyone was talking about what Aliens films were their favourites, the overarching consensus was Alien and the second one, Aliens. I'm of the controversial opinion that I do not like the second Alien film. Aliens is not sci-fi horror. In fact, it's not even classified as sci-fi horror on its Wikipedia page. It's a sci-fi action film. It's themed around horror, but it's not like the original. No, my favourite Alien film out of the original 4 is Alien 3. I said Alien and Alien 3, and someone, I really genuinely forget who, it was a bloke, said, don't you mean Aliens? And I said, no, Alien and Alien 3. And the looks of disbelief around the table were palpable. But why do I like Alien 3? It is definitely a film with problems, especially its theatrical cut. But I still like it. For one thing, I like its grim and dark atmosphere. That feels like it's more of a successor to the original film than the second Aliens was. It's tackling dark topics in a grim and unsettlingly realistic setting. Instead of the fantasy of American Marines, we have a prison colony with a weird religion and run-down employees trying their best to manage a group that very clearly, if they got themselves together, could very easily kill them and take over the whole planet. It's a dark setting. And we see Ripley, Ellen Ripley, as a character who is coping with a lot of stuff, and that makes her feel a bit more real than she did in Aliens, to be honest. I mean, credit to Sigourney Weaver. She does put in a really good performance. I think her performance manages to save Aliens from being a total schlock. But Alien 3, she feels like she just gives a little something extra to the character. And of course the ending, even if most people think it comes out of left field, it doesn't. Not for me anyway. It feels like a natural conclusion. And the fact that Weaver was unwilling to continue being in that role at that point, it feels like a good conclusion to the character's arc. Is Alien 3 my recommendation? No. Honestly, I can't recommend it to anyone who is not willing to take a risk, because it is a risk to take. If you're going to watch it, watch the original at some point by all means. That's how I first experienced it, and even though it was a bit of a culture shock after Aliens, I grew to love it more while I grew to love Aliens less. There is an extended cut. It's not a director's cut. The original director, David Fincher, was not involved in the creation of this cut, but it does restore a good chunk of content that makes the story flow better from what I've heard. I really need to get round to watching it. I've got it on DVD, I just haven't got round to watching it, because watching Alien 3 also requires some mental fortitude, because it's not a light and happy-go-lucky film. It's pretty fatalistic, and that can very easily put people off. I'm not going to be an apologist and say Alien 3 is the best thing ever. It's not the best thing ever. It is not a perfect film by any stretch of the imagination. Do I think it's unfairly maligned? Yes. Do I think it's perfect? No. And that's all I'm going to say about that. And oh dear, I can already hear the rabid fans approaching, preparing to throw me to the James Camerons. So, before they appear, I need to transfer to another ship and get out of here. In the meantime, I will leave you with a short story of my own creation. It's rough. The version you're hearing is after I've done some adjustments to it. I may want to update the version that's on my blog. I may want to just take it down. In either case, I hope you enjoy this little bit of cyberpunk noir. Gaols Finds His Man. Good morning, sir. You have new messages. Yeah, pal. Play them. Now is your chance to win 400,000 credits in the Drake Sector Lottery Draw. Enter now for just 1 credit and you could become the richest person out there. Don't dawdle. Dear Mr. Gaols, your subscription renewal request for Hot Action VR has been received and approved. We hope you continue your patronage. Mr. Gaols, our mutual client will be calling on you in 1 hour to retrieve the information we hired you to recover and transfer your fee. Be ready. Gaols sighed and stretched his arms and legs. That's fine. Pal, set up my VR set. I've got time for a quick session this evening. Use Hot Action VR Male 33. Understood, sir. Gaols got out of bed and walked into the shower cubicle, letting the steaming jets undo the knots in his muscles. 45 minutes later, when his client arrived, he was spotless. The exchange was made. Data from a local triad organisation for 40,000 credits. Enough to keep Gaols' business afloat for another 2 months. He was expecting to while away the rest of the day in solitude, but then someone else came to the door. A woman with the tight outfit and vividly dyed hair of the privileged few who lived on the uppermost levels of the terrace. She sat abruptly, then fidgeted in the chair for some moments. Gaols decided to initiate the conversation. If you want serving, I'll need to know how. Oh, yes. Sorry, well, it's somewhat delicate. Hey, didn't you read the ad? Delicate situations a speciality, discretion assured. I don't say what I don't mean. I'm glad about that. You see, I want you to find my brother. Find your brother? As in find long-lost brother or find missing brother? Isn't it the same thing? Not at all. They're totally different. So what's yours? He's missing. Since last week. I think he may be in the lower terrace strata. He doesn't know how to survive down there. I see. So you want me to find him? I'll need details. Gaols got his details, then mentioned his fee. It's 40,000 credits for one job like this. Would you accept more? Who wouldn't accept more for a job like this? I can pay you 500,000 credits. Is that acceptable? Gaols almost went slack-jawed. 500,000 credits? The same kind of sum he heard touted on the regional lottery commercials all day long. 20 times the standard amount earned by lower strata citizens. More money than he had earned in his entire life. Enough to set him up for retirement, early or otherwise. Sure, I'm willing to accept that. I'll find your brother. Call round in a week. I'll have something for you then, guaranteed. Thank you. The woman got up and left abruptly. Gaols made a note in his small book. Died woman, missing brother, 500,000 credits. He closed the book and smiled. This would be a cinch. He cut his teeth on finding people in the lower strata, whether they wanted to be found or not, even during his enforcer days when he worked for the local triad shaking down people who were late with payments. Pal, I'm going to be out for a while. If I get any calls, say I'm out on a case. Understood, sir. Pulling on his jacket, Gaols left his apartment building and mounted the vertical metro which would take him to the lower strata. He got some brief looks at the sun between the terrace's gleaming towers, then everything was plunged into industrial shadow. The smells changed from the tang of street purifiers to the industrial smog he knew so well. The metro reached its destination and he stepped out onto a dilapidated platform, stepping round a homeless man who had clearly died during the recent cold snap. The station staff would notice him once he started to smell. A 2-street walk took him to Seng's place, a small den he had frequented during his triad days. He walked in, strode through the shop and past its empty counter, into and beyond the hidden parlour with its intoxicating scents rising from discarded pipes, and into a sealed room deep within the building. He rapped on the door and a voice sounded from within. "Who is it?" "Pizza guy, you ordered extra sleazy." The door opened with a sigh and Gaols passed inside. Tseng was lying on a large divan on the opposite side of the sumptuous room. He stared at Gaols as the door closed behind him. "I never expected you would come back here, Gaols, son. You told my boys that you were now a responsible private detective. To what do I owe the pleasure?" Gaols struggled not to scowl at the false Asian accent Tseng insisted on using. "I'm looking for someone. I thought you could help me. Someone from the terrace has gone missing." Gaols gave a brief and informative description. "I've been hired to find him." Tseng gently chewed the stem of his unlit hookah. "No one has been here from the terrace for over a month. We're out of fashion at the moment. They don't need to come here for you to know. You keep your eye on everything in the lower strata. It's your business to know." "True. That's why you made such a good enforcer. My brain and your muscles made the perfect combination. I'm surprised you left for the higher strata." "I wanted to be my own man. Surely you can understand." "Yes, but I miss your little quirks. You're the only enforcer I've ever known who got paid bonuses in virtual sex. Is it still twice a day?" Gaols' eyes narrowed. "Just once these days. I haven't got free time for any more. A self-run business isn't an easy task, master." "True. And it must be hell keeping your chair in good order. I remember the bills we got after that night following the terrace anniversary job. You spent over 2 hours in the thing, practically melted its motherboard." "It was a rough mission. I needed to blow off steam." "Most of my men do that with drink, drugs, or real sex, not a chair-mounted VR system and a subscription to Hot Action VR. I don't like drink, I hate drugs, and real sex makes me squirm." "Not a good advertisement for your kind, don't you think?" "You going to help me or not?" Tseng smiled. "As this is the first time you've asked, and I owe you a favour or two, I'll do this for free. But if you keep on coming back, I'll expect payment." "Understood. Phone me when you hear anything." Gaols left without another word. Returning to his office, he rang another of his lower strata contacts. He knew her under the name Sally Surge, the name she had taken when she entered one of Tseng's businesses. Everything that Tseng didn't know, Sally would. It took half an hour to get through to her, and even then the results were fruitless. "Sorry, honey." Gaols grew red at Sally's use of his given name. "Haven't heard a thing about any terrace tots down here. It'd cause a real stir." So he moved on to his own research methods. He slowly trawled through the dark net, looking at any signs of a terrace resident getting lost in the lower strata. The whole thing looked like a big mess, and even his experienced net surfing skills turned up nothing. It was almost as if the man didn't want to be found. The revelation was immediate and complete. He didn't want to be found. And if someone didn't want to be found, the lower strata were full of alternate worlds where someone would exist beyond society's eyes. In fact, one location leapt immediately to mind. The dregs. Once part of the early city's advanced sewer system, left behind as the city climbed like the Tower of Babel towards the heavens, now it served as the home for everyone who fell or threw themselves off the grid. Once there, a person was effectively dead. Near the end of the day, he got his news. Both Sally and Tseng reported back, and both confirmed that the only signs they could find pointed to the dregs holding his quarry. Changing into something suitable for that quarter, slacks and waterproofs that looked the worse for wear, Gaols walked to the one major elevator which went down to the very deepest strata. Even then he had to find one of the ancient sewer covers and make his way down a network of ladders and ramps to reach the dregs proper. No one wanted an easy way down there. Gaols navigated a long line of ancient sewers, filled with the detritus of its ancient past, and the human remnants that drifted down from above. He even fancied he saw the remains of some in the large water channels which ran beneath him. He walked for some distance, then stopped at a vast chamber. One of the old sewer system's recycling and pumping hubs, it now stood empty like an artificial sinkhole. A shanty town stood at the base of a power relay pillar which extended from floor to ceiling. Tails of smoke rose to the ceiling and its vents, which in turn led to the city's lower strata and its eternal layer of smog. Gaols had no choice but to use the stairs, inuring himself to the mounting stench rising from the town and every vent he passed. There weren't enough outlets for the general miasma produced by a few thousand people, and he shuddered to think what the facilities were like, if they even had facilities. When he reached the main street, he found himself walking through puddles of sludge he tried not to think about. When this was done, these clothes were getting incinerated. As he pushed into another part of the town, something caught his eye. A figure who vainly struggled to avoid the puddles of filth, and who walked with a strange upright stance he remembered from earlier that day. A stance only those in the terrace would hold. Gaols came up to the man and tapped him gently on the shoulder. "Your sister's worried. She asked me to find you." The reaction was not what Gaols expected. The man turned, punched him hard in the stomach, then began running. Gaols recovered quickly and ran after his quarry. The pursuit took the two through the other side of the shanty town, up another flight of stairs, and down a large waste pipe converted by the locals into a walkway. Gaols rounded a corner, almost slipping and falling off the walkway into the festering mire beneath. His quarry was frantically climbing a ladder, heading for the bottom strata. As he continued his pursuit, Gaols wondered why this man was so terrified. Had he wanted to get lost in the dregs? Gaols emerged in the middle of a large square and saw his quarry struggling to free himself from two servitor drones who were demanding that he cease his erratic and disturbing behaviour before further measures were taken. Gaols quickly ran over and spoke with the drones. "Sorry about him. He's under treatment, PTSD. I'm his minder, but he managed to slip away. Crows upset him so. Sometimes he just doesn't know what's happening. Come on, let's go." Gaols took the man's arm, and he suddenly seemed docile. The drones let him go, and the two walked to the elevator which would take them to the upper levels. Before leaving, they had to go through decontamination to get rid of the worst of the mud and stink. They were still the only ones on the lift, as everyone else hung back. The lift took 15 minutes to reach the upper strata, so Gaols had time to talk with his companion. Why'd you run? I don't want my sister running my life anymore. That's what she does? Simon do this, Simon do that, it never stops. You know she's worried. Yeah, worried about her position. If I'm not around, who's going to make the money to look after our senile parents, keep our terrace apartment, pay for all her fancy clothes? She's a parasite and I can't shake her off. Why couldn't you just leave me there? It's not my business to help. I got paid to find you. The man looked at Gaols, and for a second their eyes locked. In that glance, Gaols saw a man driven into nothingness, someone whose own will had never been exerted, who had only ever lived for others. It had broken him. Yeah, sure, the man smiled. Guess you'll have to disappoint her. The lift, a simple platform surrounded by a scaffolding structure, was passing through a large open area where an old strata had been excavated due to contamination. Before Gaols could stop him, the man dived to one side, leaping through a gap in the scaffolding into thin air. Gaols rushed to the edge of the platform, but knew there was nothing he could do. It was a 100-foot drop. No one would survive that. The following day the woman called round again. Gaols received her with professional impassivity, and she was equally impassive when he told her of her brother's fate. She nodded slowly. I know you did all you could. Perhaps, given the circumstances, you might accept a reduction of your fee. Yeah, that's what I'd expect too. Shall we say 50,000 credits? Sure, why not? Transfer now? The transfer was done. The woman left without another word. Gaols found himself wondering how much of the original money would now be put aside to save herself and her social position. With her brother dead, she was on her own. He leaned back in his chair, smiling and looking back on what he had seen. A sister distraught at the wrong thing, a brother so afraid of his life that he saw no other way out but death, whether social or actual. And himself, the private eye who got involved. Was he responsible for that man's death? He shook his head. If he started thinking like that, he would be back on 2 sessions a day in the VR chair. With the rest of the day clear, he decided to read one of his books, then go out and get some fresh waterproof gear to replace the ones ruined in the dregs. Yep, he said with a rueful grin. Just another day in paradise. And I hope you enjoyed that short story. Fun fact, this was going to be a series of them that I was going to put out, but I found I couldn't really do much with Gaols as a character. And also that kind of noir storytelling wasn't really my thing. So, ladies and gentlemen, everyone in between, I hope you enjoyed this thing as much as you could. Apologies, slight burp. Apologies for sound weirdness in the short story, I'm sure there will be. And until next time, see ya! So he moved on to his own research methods. He slowly trawled through the dark net, looking for any... So he moved on to his own research methods. He slowly trawled through the dark net, looking at any sign of a terrace resident getting lost in the lower strata. The whole thing looked like a big mess, and even his experience net surfacing. Black, oh, not again. So he moved on to his own research methods. He slowly trawled through the dark net, looking for any sign of a terrace resident getting lost in the lower strata. The whole thing looked like a big mess, and even his experienced net surfing skill. I'm slowly melting! As he pushed into another part of the town, something caught his eye. A vigor who... The pursuit took the two through to the... The pursuit took the two through to the other side of the shantytown, up another flight of stairs, and down a large waste pipe But he managed to slip away. Crow's upset him so... I'm gonna have to redo that bit of dialogue.